Solutions. My name's Chris, and I am on the road yet again on a gorgeous Oregon morning. And it's thankfully sunny outside because it's been raining for the past like 5 days straight. And I've been collecting a whole bunch of these sort of on-the-road segments. I keep meaning to edit the video, and then I go out and I film more stuff, and then I forget to edit, and then I film more stuff, and then I don't have a chance to edit. So this one might be a little bit long because I've got a ton of on-the-road footage that I've been working on over the past 2 weeks or so. And it also helps to give me the opportunity to sort of explain some of the stuff that I'm doing. Like when I get to a client site and I'm evaluating everything for the first time, you know, a lot of people in comments are critical of like, hey, you didn't know what this was, you didn't know what that was. Well, I'm seeing this stuff for the first time, and it's just sort of my train of thought as I'm getting everything out there. So I like these videos in that it does allow me to do that, and also explain some of the stuff after the fact, such as, you know, why I did things a certain way in a previous video, and there's some of that in this video as well. One thing I was thinking about this morning that I did want to talk about was kind of something I've been trying to work on, and it has to do with procrastination. I've been making a real concerted effort to not put things off of my workday. And I'll tell you what I mean. So like, for example, I am not a big fan of stopping what I'm doing to call someone who has just requested that I call them. Like sometimes I'll get an email that it's like, hey Chris, give me a call. You know, they don't tell me what it's about. They don't tell me, you know, how long it's going to take or if they're going to be there when I do call or any of that sort of stuff. And so I always kind of put that stuff off. And I've been making a real effort to not do that lately, and it's really been paying off. So like today, someone called me. They just had some questions about this impending phone system sale that we're doing, and I was able to call them back within 10 minutes. I was on the phone for maybe 5 minutes and hung up, and I felt really good about it. And now that thing that's out there that I have to do is no longer hanging over my head. And so, yeah, I would definitely implore anyone out there to kind of try to do the same thing. Don't put off the stuff that you don't want to do just because you don't want to do it. Tackle those things first, right? And then you don't have them out there, sort of dreading that you have to do these things later. Anyways, that's my pro tip for the day. Today I'm heading out to do a pretty simple job. I'm still working for that same real estate company that I've been working on to have 5 offices up and down the Oregon coast. Today, I've already done the network for this location. It's probably in this video somewhere. I don't remember if it is or not. But I've already done the network for this location, and I just need to swap over their phones, which are these old school Yealink T20P phones, which they're end of life since 2014, and I'm helping them cut costs by reusing those phones, but man, what a bear are they to work with. So I have the process down now, right? I took a couple of the phones home and I worked on them until I have a very smooth process for not only factory defaulting those phones, but getting them set up on the new Crosstalk PBX phone system that this customer is going to be using. And so as of right now, 3 out of 5 of the offices are completely done. This office that I'm going to right now, the network's done. They just need the phones to be switched over, so it'll take me about 2 hours to do that. And then I only have 1 office left, which I am tackling on Tuesday. And then this whole job is done. And man, I have been getting so much positive feedback from the employees at all of these offices about how much better the internet is, how, oh my gosh, we can stream music and talk on the phone at the same time, and that kind of stuff. So it's been really nice to hear that feedback. A lot of times it just takes someone who knows what they're doing to get in there and just make sure they're set up with the right equipment. I mean, you guys complain about the wiring jobs and stuff, but that's like the least of it. Like the most important thing is getting the correct equipment and getting it configured properly. All right, so enough ranting for today. We're gonna do this job, but first I'm gonna grab myself a coffee and then head out for some more on the road fun. I've been doing a lot of these kinds of videos lately, but just coincidentally, I've had to do a lot of work around town. And actually, I wasn't even planning on going out today but I received a call from one of my clients. They've got this old school Asus Vivo PC based free PBX system. I even did a video on this Asus Vivo PC years and years and years ago, probably about 5 years ago. And it's been running strong ever since. Their PBX has been just fine. I've never upgraded it to a newer version of the free PBX software because it has just always worked. And I think it's like version 2.11 or something of free PBX. It's like a very, very old version. Well, they reached out to me this morning and they've got a strange issue going on. The PBX is actually fine. I'm able to connect to it remotely through VPN. I was able to hook up a soft phone extension to the PBX. I was able to make an inbound and an outbound call out of the PBX. But none of their phones, and they only have 2 phones inside this location. This is a restaurant. None of their phones have dial tone. And they had 1 extra spare phone, and I had them plug it in to the network switch, and that phone also did not power up and did not get dial tone. Their network switch is an old, again, probably about a 5-year-old Edge Router 24, or I'm sorry, Edge Switch 24 with PoE. So it's a good PoE switch. I know that it's not like the PoE went out on the network switch because there are other devices in that network switch that are still powered up. They've got some access points and whatnot that still have power. So I'm not sure really what's going on. We're gonna get down there and we just have to see what's happening and investigate. And that's, a lot of times in these videos, you guys, poke fun at me for like, basically my train of thought as I'm looking at something. But that's kind of what I'm showing here, is showing up to a client site, and then you see all of this different equipment, and you have to start looking at it and figure out, okay, this is that, this goes here, that plugs into here, what's this weird device over here? And so like a lot of people mention that, I ask out loud like, oh, I wonder what this is, and I said that in the last video I did. And a lot of people say, oh, it's this. Well, by the time I was done with that site, I knew what it was. But when I'm asking what this is, that's just my train of thought. That's the process that I'm going through to sort of see what's happening in this network that I'm just taking a look at or just stepping into for the first time. And really what I'm trying to show is that it's okay to not know everything about everything when you go into a customer's site. The more important thing is the ability to figure out what you're looking at when you get there. And so that is sort of what I do. I just show up and here we go. Now, this site, I actually know what's going on with this site already because I'm the one who originally set it up, 5 or so years ago. And so I should be able to figure out hopefully pretty quickly what's going on with the PoE. The Edge switch I can see in UNMS, so it's there. I can see that it's got some devices that are powered up by PoE and whatnot. They also mentioned, the customer mentioned that they had their phone company out that was fiddling around with some of the wires and didn't know where things were plugged in and then eventually just left. So I'm suspicious that maybe they might have moved some wires around that they weren't supposed to. And actually, the last time I went there was some weird wiring that was done that I had to figure out, and it was like causing their entire point of sale system to be offline. So it's possible that they've messed something up and now I just have to go down and fix it. I tried to troubleshoot as much as I could without having to go down there, but now we're having to go down there. First though, I'm gonna get myself some coffee. Okay, coffee in hand, and they gave me this little coffee stopper that stops the coffee from pouring out. Look, it's like a guitar pick. It's got a little guitar head on it too. That's super cool. Never seen that before. This place, this coffee place that I go to also has, oh my gosh, the most amazing, look at this. This is a veggie sausage and pepper jack cheese croissant pastry thing. Oh my gosh, they make them fresh here. They're so good. Not the best for you, but super, super good. And I'm not a vegetarian or anything, but I just can't get enough of these veggie sausage pepper jack croissant things they've got. They're awesome. Now on to the client. It's about a 25-minute drive down the Oregon coast. All right, so that job is done, and that's maybe one of the more interesting jobs I've done in a while. So I unfortunately was not able to actually film inside because the the people that run the company were there, and I don't like filming in front of people, especially if I'm just having an open discussion with you guys about the problems with their network and that sort of thing. So I didn't get any footage inside, but I showed up. There's two voice over IP phones, and there's one analog phone that connects into a Cisco SPA112 gateway. The Cisco was not working, right? So the Cisco gateway phone was offline. I checked the voice over IP phones. Both of them were working perfectly fine, but they used that cordless phone, the analog plugged into the Cisco SPA cordless phone, as their main phone, since it's a restaurant and they, walk around carrying that phone. Here's what was weird. The phone was not working. On the phone, it was a little, Panasonic cordless thing like you get at Costco. It said no line, right? So there was no line showing on the phone. So I unplugged it from where it was, and I plugged it directly into the Cisco SPA. So rather than running into the wire that runs through the wall to where that phone's normally located, I just took it and plugged it directly into the Cisco, and boom, phone comes online, everything's working perfectly. So there was not a problem with this phone system. I went back and I plugged the phone back into the other side where it was before, and all of a sudden it's working fine again. So that means there's a problem somewhere between the Cisco SPA112 through the wall, the wiring in the wall, etc., out to that location. And maybe the RJ11 jack came loose or something and it just wasn't plugged all the way in. The principal people that I speak with here had mentioned, before I came out, I had them troubleshoot, and I said, take the Yealink phone, which is typically not plugged in because they don't use it, and I said, plug it into any open port on the switch. So they did that, and they said it didn't work, and so that's why I ended up coming down here. I'm like, okay, well, maybe there's some sort of switch problem or whatever. When I got here, the Yealink phone had an RJ11 cable plugged into it, so they weren't even using a Cat5e cable for the voice over IP phone, and that's why that one wasn't powering up. So immediately I was like, okay, well, maybe this is going to be easier than I thought it was. But as it turns out, it's never as easy as you think it is. While I was here, they also told me that one of their access points is having intermittent connectivity issues, where it seems like they can connect to the access point fine, but they're unable to connect to the internet. And when I had first looked at this site this morning before I came out here, I also noticed that one of their access points was offline. They have 3 of the UAPs, the old school 2.4 gigahertz UAPs. And these access points, again, there was an intermittent problem with one of them. So I said, all right, let me just upgrade them. I updated them all to the latest firmware. Everything's fine. And then I was like, you know what? Let me do a little bit more testing. So I tried to plug my computer into the switch, and it wouldn't work. I didn't get network connectivity. So I took that same Yealink phone and I plugged it into a different port in the switch. And when I plugged the Yealink phone into a different port in the switch, it got power, but it had no network. And I was like, boy, this is weird. And I tried 3 different ports, and it was the same thing for the Yealink phone. The Yealink phone got power, but it had no access to the network. And then I started noticing that as I'm plugging in the cables, they're not really like clicking. When you plug in a network cable and it goes click, and you know that it's connected, right? They weren't really clicking. I would push them in, and they're like kind of not actually connecting all the way. It seems like the connection's not really solid. And then I started noticing that there's a thin layer of grease over everything, because I had my hand on the post of their network rack and my hand got like grease all over it. This is a restaurant. The network closet is in the office, which is on the 2nd level directly above the kitchen. Okay, so somehow kitchen fumes and kitchen grease have been getting up into the network cabinet area, and it's just covered everything in grease. So that network switch, all of the exposed ports, all of the ports that have been plugged in forever seem fine, but all of the ports that have been exposed to this grease for 5 years basically seem to have connectivity issues. Go figure, right? So I told him, I said, God, yeah, honestly, I would replace that switch. It's 5 years old. It's now coated in grease. You know, maybe we get something that's a little bit more robust than the one that you have. Or, you know, maybe you can come up with some sort of like grease solution, put it on the end of a Q-tip and get in there and sort of clean out all the contacts on the switch or something like that. Yeah, I mean, if you guys have a solution to that problem, let me know down in the comments below, because I was just like, you know, I don't know what to tell you. Everything that's working fine is working fine, but if grease is getting into the contacts in that switch, you know, over time, that problem is just going to get worse and worse and worse. And so, I mean, it might have been the problem with that phone. You know, it's like the cable, like I unplugged it and plugged it back in, and when I plugged it back in, it started working. So is it just that grease had gotten in there somehow? One of the contacts was not just connecting properly or something like that? Very well could have been. But yeah, so I gave them my best advice, and at least they are back up and running now. I did a couple of other routine changes that they needed done, and now I am out of here. All right, out once again. Today is Friday, May 29th, and we are going back to that small office in Seal Rock that I did the install for in the last video. They had one issue with one of the phones where they put it on speakerphone and they couldn't hear. I suspect that they just put it on mute instead of speakerphone. But we're going to check that out, and they also wanted me to set up their inbound routing where it's, you know, call in, press 1 for this, press 2 for that, and then go to some sort of general voicemail box if they don't answer. So should be a real easy setup, and that's all I've got on my plate for today. All right, 2 hours later, and that job is done. The speakerphone volume thing was actually a firmware problem. These Clearly IP phones had a boost in gain, and they're supposed to automatically update firmware, but for some reason these phones had not, so I just updated the firmware on the phones. That problem went away. I spent the rest of the time doing some setup and training, and that's the interesting thing about selling phone systems, is that much of the success of the phone system install has to do with the details, right? So how much effort you put into the details. Is follow me set up? Is the voicemail set up? You know, are the calls routing in the correct way, and all of that sort of stuff. And if you get all the details correct, then you're going to have a successful phone system deployment. The other thing is training. So I spent a good amount of time training the administrator, the sort of the admin person for this office on how to work with Follow Me, how to work with the voicemail systems and all that. And then she in turn will train all of the other real estate agents and basically make sure that it rolls out successfully. If you install a phone system for someone, you don't pay attention to any of the details. You just give them a phone system and say, here you go. It's not going to be successful because there's such a strong learning curve. It's all easy stuff, but it's such a strong learning curve that people are going to hate the phone system, right? So if you take the time to properly document how things are done, how you set it up, and then do some training to say, look, these are the steps that you have to go through to make sure that an extension is set up, to make sure that you're forwarding to their cell phone if they want to do that, that sort of stuff. That's where the success lies in a successful phone system deployment. Going out to visit a couple of customers today. First customer is a customer that we visited a few weeks ago, where I installed that Nano HD with the beautiful black mesh covering on it, and I have to go back to install a second access point at that location because of a huge concrete wall that sort of runs down the center of that building. It was actually two buildings that were sort of combined at one point, but they did not remove the big concrete wall, and big concrete walls are not good for wireless access points and wireless connectivity. So we're going to add another Nano HD as well as another flex switch, so that we don't have to redo a home run back to their main switch. We can just use that flex switch, take PoE power in, and then power up both a camera and an access point at that location. While we're on the way to that customer site, I also wanted to provide an update to the Raspberry Pi network monitoring video that I did a while back. That was not an on-the-road video, but I've received a ton of people that have asked me for a follow-up. If you remember, I had a customer who had intermittent problems with their network, where they had this one home run that went all the way down to their, downstairs sort of switch area where they've got a couple of servers, and it would intermittently, sometimes for an hour, sometimes for 10 minutes, sometimes twice a day, sometimes once a week. It would sort of drop that connection from their internet or their firewall, which is USG, over to the switch through that home run. And I tested the cable, everything was fine. I did a whole bunch of troubleshooting that I'm not going to rehash here. If you guys want, I'll put a link to that video up on the screen here somewhere. You can go check it out for yourselves. Well, here's the follow-up to that video. We still don't know what happened. So I put the Raspberry Pi in place, and the Raspberry Pi was set to basically ping out to the internet, and if it loses ping for any reason, it starts a packet capture to capture, hopefully, broadcast traffic in that back network. The thinking behind that is that maybe there's some sort of broadcast storm happening that's taking this equipment offline. Well, of course, as soon as you start monitoring it, nothing happens, and that's exactly what happened. I left that Raspberry Pi there for about 6 weeks, and the problem didn't happen once in 6 weeks. So that's very strange in and of itself. I went back and I pulled the Raspberry Pi and I said, well, maybe it's just one of those things. Maybe the problem went away. The client also told me that around the time that I put the Raspberry Pi in, we live out here on the Oregon coast and we have to deal with rodents, mice and rats and stuff. And they said that they had a rodent problem, and they came in, they had a pest guy come in and take care of that rodent problem just about the same time that I installed the Raspberry Pi. So I thought, well, it could have been that a mouse had chewed through the cable a little bit, or it was rubbing up against something and it was exposed, and that was causing some sort of weird issue with the connectivity between the two sides. Who knows what could have happened, and I don't have the ability to peer into the wall to see if there's a problem with that cable. The cable tested just fine with my testing tools. So, fast forward a little bit longer, and the problem started happening again. About 6 weeks after I put the Raspberry Pi in, I went back and I pulled the Raspberry Pi out, and then everything was fine again for about another month or so, and then the problem started happening intermittently again. Not as much though, so it wasn't happening nearly as much, and then over time, this is like now going back to right at the start of the pandemic, right? Then everyone got locked down, and then they weren't there, and they're trying to access things remotely, and they weren't noticing that it was happening more and more frequently over time. So now that here in Oregon, we've sort of lifted some of the stay-at-home measures, and people are getting back to work, they were now noticing that it was just not working, again, consistently or intermittently not working. So they had a big problem where they basically, it went down and it didn't come up for like 24 hours till I could actually get out there. So I got out to their site. I think it went down on like a Sunday, and I got out there Monday morning at about 10 a.m. And the problem that I had is that normally I would just say, well, let's just use a different home run down to the network closet. But there were no other network jacks. There were no other home runs on this entire stretch of wall. It was just the one Ethernet jack. So I basically had to, I told him, I said, listen, this is going to be ugly, but I'm going to build you a cable, and I'm going to run it along the floor. I'm going to duct tape it to the floor so you don't trip on it. And it's going to go across the middle of the floor over to this other home run that's about, 15 feet away across the room. And we're going to plug it in there, and then we're going to wait and see what happens. So that's what I did. I built them a new cable. I ran it across the floor. It looks terrible, but if it works, we will then take this temporary duct tape cable and actually route it up and over the ceiling or wherever we have to go so that it's hidden and doesn't look like such an eyesore. The good news is that today is Friday. I put that in this past Monday, and the problem hasn't happened since. So it looks like, where we were looking before at that cable, that cross connect that goes down to their sort of secondary server area, that is likely the culprit. We don't know why it's behaving so intermittently, but that is apparently why it was happening, because the new cable seems to have resolved the problem. I also don't know why when we put the Raspberry Pi in, and it was constantly pinging out to the internet, that the problem wasn't occurring when that was happening also. So again, sometimes there's never an answer, there's only a fix, right? And so we want to get the fix in place so that the client has good network connectivity throughout their whole office. All right, so next stop is I'm going to grab myself a coffee, and then we're going to head over and install this Nano HD and the Flex switch. All right, so job one is not completely done yet. I was able to get everything installed, but I do have to come back on Monday because there was another little section I was supposed to work on that's in the dining room of this restaurant, and by the time I got to it, people had already started dining in the restaurant. And I don't want to be up on a ladder, 3 feet away from someone's head while they're eating, screwing and unscrewing and wiring stuff. So I'm gonna have to come back on Monday, and I will come back before the restaurant opens in order to make sure that I can get the rest of this stuff done. It'll take me about 20 minutes to button everything up, and then we're good to go. Now, I was able to successfully install the Flex switch as well as the Nano HD access point. I wanted to talk about the wiring, and when I do these installs, I oftentimes get people telling me how crappy my wiring is. And so, yes, is it the best wiring that the world has ever seen? Absolutely not. But keep in mind that you are working for your client, right? And so we have to do what's in the best interest of the client. In the case of this particular install, I look at this. It's the back prep area of a restaurant kitchen where I was installing the Nano HD. So you got to ask yourself, is the client willing to pay extra to make sure that the wiring just looks absolutely beautiful back in that area? And the answer is no. They are not willing to pay extra for that. So you do what you can with the time that you're given, and you give you do a good job for a fair price, okay? If I was installing an access point into the, front lobby of a major law firm that has clients that don't want to see cruddy wiring, that client will probably want to pay more so that you can run the wire properly or go into the walls or whatever you're going to do. But you can't just sit here and spend all your time doing it. It's time that you're going to charge your client when they're not aware that you're going to do that, when good enough is good enough, right? So the wiring job that I did here, while it's not pretty, it's not the best wiring job I've ever done, it's good enough for this particular installation, and I guarantee you, I will not ever hear one single word from this client about the wiring job. They're not going to say, oh my gosh, well, boy, the Wi-Fi works great, but I wish you had cleaned up those wires a little bit. They will not say that. In fact, I have not once ever had a client complain about a wiring job that I did. Not once ever. So just keep that in mind. I mean, you guys, this is a real world situation that we're talking about, and a lot of you guys are kind of like backseat driving my installs, but ask yourself what you would do in the same situation. If you're installing a Flex Mini and a Nano HD in the back room of a kitchen that no one's going to see except for the employees that work there, are you going to spend the time and charge the client extra money to make the wiring look pretty? All right, and honestly, most of the time, most of you are going to say no. So at any rate, we're done with that job. We're moving on to the next job. This is the third of 5 offices that I'm setting up for this real estate company. And this one is, they've got DSL. They've got a 20 down by 3 up DSL. I had the company that provides the DSL drop off a new modem that supposedly is going to get them 50 by 4 or 50 by 5 DSL. I forget what it was, but there's only 3 voice over IP phones. So the upgraded DSL in conjunction with the Edge Router X, the quality of service, all that sort of stuff installed, hopefully will give this area decent voice over IP results. And we will just have to see about that. I have heard that they don't have anything but DSL at their location, the location of this one office, but I have heard that there is another company coming in that's going to be delivering fiber that should cover this area by the end of the year. So if this DSL thing doesn't work out and then fiber is available, we'll just switch over to a more robust internet connection. Okay, so that's it for now. We are now moving on to site number 2. All right, so that second job is done. When I got there, boy, it's kind of a mess. They had a bunch of stuff in this one little tiny cabinet in the corner, and really tough to work in there. they had a power strip that was not hung up on the wall or anything. It was just literally upside down inside that cabinet. So I got the power strip on the wall. Again, I didn't spend too much time on making the cabling super gorgeous. I just got in there and made sure everything was connected. It looks a lot better once I'm done with it, though, that's for sure. The DSL modem, a PPPoE connection, was not in bridge mode. So they didn't have a firewall before. I put a firewall in, and then I had to contact the ISP and work with them to get that modem into bridge mode so that the WAN IP address for the PPPoE connection lives on the Edge Router X and not on their modem. So I got that done relatively painlessly. Then I got an access point up on the wall. The rest of the time was spent working with the folks in that office to make sure their printers are reconnected, make sure their computers are reconnected to Wi-Fi and all that sort of good stuff. But they went from a very, very slow DSL connection to one that's now about 45 megabits by 23 megabits. So that turned out to be a lot better than what they had previously. The last hour or so, I was trying to get a phone connected, so I didn't get any of the phone stuff done that I wanted to get done. I'm trying to reuse the phones that this client had previously, and they are old school, end-of-life Yealink T20Ps. And so, yeah, they're very old firmware on the phone. You can't redirect with HTTP. They're only redirectable with TFTP. Maybe the newer firmware would do it. I tried to update the firmware manually, and it just wasn't working out. So they had a couple of spare phones. I grabbed those spare phones. I'm going to take them back to my home office and try to fiddle with them there instead, because I have it's a much easier environment to work in, plus I can have a beer while I'm doing it. Sorry about all the rattling I got going on in the back here. Apologies in advance for that. I've got a step ladder stacked on top of a regular ladder, and it's bouncing all over the place. I had an interesting upgrade this morning. I wanted to talk about it. I have a client that is on a very old version of UniFi Video. They're running about a dozen cameras or so. It's so old that it's installed on the first PC chassis that I used to install UniFi Video on, which was the Shuttle PC, which actually I love that form factor. I wish they still made those. So this Shuttle PC has been running UniFi Video just fine for years. They were on version 3.9.12, I believe is the highest version that you could be on with Ubuntu 14.04, which is the operating system that they were running. Now I was having a problem with one of the cameras, or adopting a new camera to that system, and it turns out that the problem was just a mistake on my part, but throughout the troubleshoot I was like, you know what, let me just go ahead and update this thing to Ubuntu 16.04 so that I can get on the latest UniFi Video, which I believe is 3.10.2 if I'm not mistaken. If I got those version numbers wrong, I'll put a little thing down at the bottom here. And so surprisingly, the upgrade from Ubuntu 14.04 to Ubuntu 16.04 with UniFi Video 3.10 went perfectly smoothly. I shouldn't say perfectly smoothly. There were some, dependency issues. And of course, when you do that upgrade, you're actually completely uninstalling UniFi Video, and you have to reinstall it from scratch and then restore from backup. So if you're ever going to have to do that, make sure you take a backup of UniFi Video before you make that transition. But it does work. It worked well. And now they're on Ubuntu 16.04 LTS, and they have the latest UniFi Video, or I should say the last version of UniFi Video. Who knows if there will ever be another one. All right, next off, I'm heading up to another client where I'm going to be doing a full network rip and replace, as well as moving their phone systems to a Crosstalk PBX. It's 12:35 p.m. right now, and I expect that is going to take up the rest of my afternoon. Okay, I already started ripping some of this stuff out because it just had to, but here we have the DSL connection that comes in. Cable goes all the way down here and then up to the CenturyLink DSL modem, which then fans out into this Netgear, which is just hanging by one screw, and then over to this Arlo camera, wireless camera. And yeah, then we've got the locations. So basically, connections coming out of the Netgear switch into the various locations. A little bit of cable management needing to be done here. And then, of course, we've got this old phone system, which, again, I already started pulling pieces out here. Look at that guy. On hold plus 6,000. And we have this Ring Right Plus and the old Samsung DS616. All of this is getting swapped out. Just found this cable here. This cable, I don't know how easy it is to see, but is strung up and over this door with Scotch tape. Scotch tape. All the way up and over. I'm actually surprised that's still up. All right, just about 5 hours later. Not all of that was spent doing this. I had to wait for Charter to do their stuff. But here we go. We've got the UAP-AC Pro up top, Edge Router X. I reused the Netgear switch, but I moved it. Remember, it was hanging over here. I moved it over here, and then I shortened up these cables so that they're a little bit tighter in terms of going out to the locations there. DSL is now gone, and Charter installed the phone modem for a fax line, and then the internet modem right here. They brought everything in from the street, and they actually had to go from like 3 telephone poles away. So as much work as I did on this, their job was a lot more difficult than mine. Also, I ran into something unexpected, which is why it took me a little bit longer. I was not expecting to switch over the phones today. I just wanted to do the internet, and then I was going to come back and do the phones later. But, of course, the phones at this location, this is the only location out of the 5 locations that I'm doing, all of the phones had static IP addresses set, and they weren't using DHCP. So I didn't have the password to get into the phone, so I basically had to go through factory default all of these Yealink T20Ps, which are the slowest phone on the planet. They're end of life as of like 2014. I had to factory default them all, update the firmware, and then have them auto-provision to my Crosstalk PBX. So I was not expecting to do that. It took me another extra hour and a half or so to take care of that, but I'm actually glad I got it done because now I don't have to come back to this location. So that's a good thing. All right, there you have it, a look at some of the various on-the-road experiences I've had over the past couple of weeks. I hope you guys enjoyed that. I just finished the job that I was talking about when I started this video. It took me just over an hour when I thought it was going to take 2. And when something goes so smooth and so quick, sometimes you're like, did I forget something? Did I screw something up? But no, in this case, luckily, everything went perfectly smooth. And I got this office's phones cut over. So that is 4 out of 5 of the offices that I've been cutting over to a Crosstalk PBX and completely replacing the networks for, completely done. And I have 1 office left, which I'm going to be doing next Tuesday. Whew, it's been a big project. All right, so that's gonna do it for this episode of On the Road. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, make sure you give me a thumbs up and also put a comment down below if you have anything to say. I'd love to hear it, and I absolutely read every single comment on every one of my videos. All right, that's gonna do it. We will see you in the next video.